represents Western Oakland and Western Wayne counties and a member of Republican leadership in Washington.
Thanks, Congressman, for being here. Well, the stimulus checks that Congress approved a month or so ago are starting to arrive now in local communities. Is this money, this $875 million, is it going to be the trick for fixing the economy?
I think the fundamental problem that we have in the economy, as everyone will agree, is the banking situation, the credit crisis. And unfortunately, it was, from the beginning, approached as a liquidity problem as opposed to an insolvency problem. You are sitting now with what I believe to be at least 2 or 3 zombie banks. They're continuing to be propped up by the government. A policy that started with the Bush administration, continues through the Obama administration. One that is yet to unfreeze the credit markets, is leading to trillions of U.S. taxpayer dollars, either through the Treasury or through the Federal Reserve, into a policy that has not and will not work, and will in very many ways endanger us to the point where we will have a lost decade, much like Japan did. That is the fundamental problem. Here in Detroit, we understand that very gravely, because if we can't move cars off the lots, if people can't get financing, all the restructuring in the world will be for naught.
Well, yeah, but what about this 875? Is that going to help us? I mean, is that going to have an impact, or is that just money frittered away?
No, I think it will always be helpful to have people keep more of their money in a recessionary period. Families hunker down. They want to make sure that the nest egg is safe. If they get to keep the hard-earned money that they have, they will start to feel more confident over time. The problem is that as they see the chaos in the financial markets, as they see that that is not working, they still continue to hunker down. As they see their government acting diametrically opposed to what they're doing, which is expanding debt, expanding spending, that in turn becomes counterproductive to the type of confidence you want to build with such tax relief.
Republicans in the Congress didn't support the economic stimulus plan. What do you think what policy would you recommend Washington undertake to try to fix this problem?
Well, right now, what I would do is I would do what I should have done in the beginning with the banks, and is now gaining credibility, as you saw from the TARP Oversight Board, is you have to understand that these banks cannot be propped up indefinitely. It is unjust to take your money, your hard-earned money, and send it to the banks that have acted irresponsibly and put us in this situation. You have to provide order to markets to get private investment in. TARP is the absence of order. It is chaos with your money. What you have to do is go in, have a real stress test, let healthy banks operate, troubled banks that are in the middle. You can take those assets off the books, do debt for equity swaps, and the ones that are insolvent, you have to close them down.
Well, Congressman, you're in Washington. Do you see a credible blueprint in place for emerging out of this deep recession?
No. I think that one of the problems that we're doing is we're trying to, in many ways, replicate what Michigan's done, is where we have a problem, you try to go from day to day, quarter to quarter. In the end, what I'm afraid of is we're going to work our way not just into a lost decade, but we could face massive inflation. The goal that Bernanke has at the Federal Reserve, Chairman Bernanke, has been, if you continue to put these things on the books of the Federal Reserve, if you continue with massive spending from the federal government, in the end, we'll just wind down the inflation once we get out of a deflationary period. But you would need both the government and the Federal Reserve around the clock, much like Volcker and Reagan in the 80s, to squeeze that inflation out, and that is extremely painful. And I don't know that it is going to be possible for them to do that if even this works.
So you think it's going to take some time. But do you have hope for the future?
Oh, I have hope for the future. Yes, as much as an Irishman can. Yeah.
Oh, that's true. You are an Irishman.
Qualify that. Of course, the greatest strength of America remains with free people, and it's a question of how you allow them to do this. And in many ways, I know it was novel that you two agreed on something, but we're seeing that throughout Michigan, is the way the communities come together behind the auto industry, behind the restructuring, where we continue to grit our teeth, and we will get through this.
Well, we seem to be all alone down there. I mean, we don't seem to have many friends. The Michigan delegation's speaking out in support of the auto industry, but not many hands going up seconding your motions. Are we at the mercy of coastal California, East Coast environmentalists who hate the industry?
Well, and Southerners in Texas and other places, the polling came out that showed 75% of the country does not mind us going into bankruptcy.
And now some that show 90%.
Which means that the consumer culture is now considered as disposable people. And I think that they are sadly mistaken. The presumption that you do not have to manufacture, that you do not have to produce anything in a country, and you can simply consume wealth and shift it around, leads to a very dangerous imbalance. So
what's the carbon tax going to, or the cap and trade plan going to do to the economy?
I think for a manufacturing state in particular, it's going to be very very, very painful, very, very unproductive. What happens is they want to sell the credits to the companies, but the goal is to have them pass that on to consumers to change their way of life. It would go to a utility, then become an energy tax hidden in a bill that you get. It would go into any manufactured product in the United States, and then be passed on to the consumers. As Reagan said, corporations are not taxpayers, they're tax collectors.
Well, I've been saying to Nolan for some time, I mean, well, I think it's probably been more partisan than any of us probably would like to have seen, or at least this group of people in Washington. But I think we're moving into regional interests as people begin to talk about the next bills. And I'm curious what you think about that regional interest. But I've also said to Nolan more than once that how do you really have the true public policy debate? President Obama says, I don't want to see them producing SUVs. Manufacturers are producing what the consumer wants. How do you have the real debate in the public policy arena about should we have SUVs on the road? And oh, by the way, when they talk about Europe and Asia, they've had a gasoline tax for 2 decades. Public policymakers made that decision. Will those real debates occur in Washington?
I think they will. Once, as you rightly point out, Debbie, you realize that it's not just Republican versus Democrat. What you're seeing is going back to what the country was designed for, decentralization of government, election by district, election by state, because communities and states have different interests in each other. And we're starting to see this. We saw some of it in the bipartisan votes against the stimulus and against the $3.5 trillion budget. But you're also starting to see it emerge even in the auto industry, where people, it wasn't about party. The irony is that as a Republican, I'm dealing with Senator Shelby and Corker, and yet in the end, no friend of Michigan in the minds of many, President Bush approves a bridge loan. And then you continue to see these types
we've got to wrap
coalitions.
up. We're running out of time, but we'll have you back. I know you've been very active in standing up for the industry. We'd like to hear your thoughts as this thing unfolds. So we'll have you back soon.
Well, I learned from Chairman Dingell.
Well, we've got to learn how Michigan stands up and starts to build coalitions with other states to get our voices heard.
Thanks, Congressman.
You're a leader in it.
We've got to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll discuss the Kwame Kilpatrick uproar and troubles in Japan's auto industry.